you. I want to thank, before Scott comes, I want to thank him for spending the week with us, but more than that, for the years of heart and life preparation, for the years of thought preparation that goes into a week like this, that comes as a culmination of a lot of travel, a lot of conversations, a lot of research, and just a heart for God. And so, Scott, thank you for being with us this week. We value your input. Our conversation with the faculty yesterday was profitable. I and Dr. Yarbrough will take him to lunch, and his insights for what theological education needs to be around the world and is very helpful for us. And those who have given to make your education possible, you need to know that part of the subplot for this week, though he and I have not talked about it, is that when you get into ministry, it will be your church and your people who will support the next generation. Otherwise, seminary education goes by the wayside, and the church ultimately suffers. And so for academic credibility within the culture that is so needed in terms of in the public square conversations, for relevancy in churches to see generations of men and women, boys and girls come through, but also for those whom God touches to become reproducers, the equippers of the equippers, the teachers of the teachers, the pastors to the pastors. That's really what seminary education, a seedbed of ministry production, is all about. And so this is very relevant. Even though you're attending here and he's talking about other seminaries elsewhere, it's great preparation for you for future ministry, for your future vision for what God is doing around the world. So I hope you're connecting those dots. It's helpful to do it that way. Would you join me in thanking Scott as he comes for his final session with us?
Well, thank you so much, Mark, for your life and passion and the model of leadership that you are not only for this institution, but I know broader than that too. Very much appreciated. Yesterday, we ended by talking about the third trend in evangelical seminary education, and this was the trend toward increased diversity, a movement away from a single model of a traditional seminary to a more diverse model of programs. One of the reasons that this has come about is the necessity for seminaries to survive. That is, that the traditional model is becoming less and less viable financially for a number of reasons. The second reason for this increased diversity is for those seminaries to thrive. And that is that in response to the leadership needs of the church as they change, the seminary has also changed to provide for those diverse leadership needs. And as we saw yesterday, that diversity is expressed in a number of different areas, such as these questions. Who are the students? Where are they being trained? When are they being trained? What are they being taught? And so forth. Today, I'd like to pick up on a fourth trend. And this trend actually is somewhat of an aspect of this third trend. It's one way in which diversity is expressed in the different programs, and that's online education. And we'll see if there we go. Online education. The reason I want to deal with this separately is because of its significance. Because those questions about who, what, where, when, how are answered so radically different in the online environment. And so there is a significant potential to change traditional seminary model because of the introduction and use of online education. The second reason I think it's significant enough to address separately is because it forces us to ask difficult questions about the very nature of theological education. And we're going to spend some time doing that today. Well, first what I want to do is talk about the growth of online education, particularly in the academy. And as our basic thesis is that the seminary often reflects changes in the academy, I want to demonstrate just briefly what's happening in the academy in North America. And what I've chosen to do is to do so by using a comparable degree, and that is the Master of Business Administration, MBAs, because they are professional postgraduate degrees, similar in that way to the MDiv. And what you can see here is this incredible growth just in the last 5 years of fully online accredited MBAs in the US, adding approximately 100 new programs every year. And so that in the last 5 years, we've seen a tenfold increase in fully online MBA programs. A growing number of prestigious MBA programs are now offered fully online, many of them with more non-traditional online students than are in their residential programs. So if these professional programs here in North America are growing as they are, how about overseas? How about in the majority world? And how about in the seminary world? Let's take a quick look at that point. So we did a survey a few years ago asking questions about online programs with the seminaries that we work with. And the response was, and let me interpret this chart for you, the response was that at that time, maybe that was 2 years ago, that 36%, over a third of the seminaries we work with were in some way using online education already. And one of the amazing things, it doesn't show on this chart, but one of the amazing things that over half of those seminaries had implemented online education within the last 4 years from the time that they responded to this survey. So it is a relatively recent phenomenon in majority world seminaries. But what was really striking to us was when we asked the question, are you likely or very likely to implement online education within the next 5 years? And of those 2/3 that were not already using online education, fully 3/4 of those seminaries responded, yes, we will likely or very likely be using online education in the next 5 years. Which means 5 years from now, if all of those schools were to have migrated to the use of online education, fully 85%, the 1/3 that already exists, plus the 75% of the 2/3, that's 85%, would be using online education in seminaries in the majority world. Now that is a dramatic trend, change that we're seeing in evangelical theological education overseas. One of the schools I've mentioned before that has been using online education, in fact, it's a fully online seminary. They don't have any residential courses. This is South African Theological Seminary. I mentioned them yesterday in the context of doctoral programs. Here's a few more distinctives of SATs in terms of their doctoral level education. It's as I said, fully online. It's the only accredited evangelical doctoral level education in South Africa. A very modest tuition cost of $10,000 for someone who's outside of North America. That's not $10,000 for each year. That's $10,000 total for the doctoral program. For those inside Africa, $6,000. You want to move to Africa? It's the largest evangelical PhD now in the world, with over 110 students, I believe. So it means that 1/5 of the evangelical PhD students that are now in the majority world are enrolled at SATs. Amazing growth. This program began 7 years ago. So they've seen amazing growth. Obviously, there's a need here which is being met by a program like this. Well, I said that that one of the reasons this is such a significant trend is because it gives us the opportunity to reflect deeply on the very nature of theological education. Not everybody in the academy, not to speak of the seminary, not everybody in the academy embraces online education. There are significant questions that need to be asked and explored as we think about this particular form of education, and particularly of theological education. And that's been done in a number of different books and publications. This is one that I found to be very helpful by Mary Hess, called Engaging Technology in Theological Education. And this is one that one of her comments about how thinking about online theological education forces us to think about the very nature of theological education. And this is a bit of a paraphrase, although I have quotation marks. The advent of the web, and with it the ability to take teaching and learning out of our typical classrooms and practice it in a way that erases time and ignores geography, has brought some particularly thorny dilemmas front and center. We profess faith in an incarnational God. What does it mean to engage a technology that perhaps urges us to ignore our own embodiness? Isn't the practice of ministry a fundamentally relational process? And so shouldn't our teaching be that too? These are very important questions. Is there something in the very nature of theological education that somehow makes online delivery incompatible? What is at the very core of theological education that would suggest that the modes of delivery are somehow limited? That there's something at the core of what we're trying to accomplish in the goals of theological education that imply there are certain means that are not appropriate or not suitable to accomplish those goals. I like the way that Mary Hess subtitles her book, All That We Can't Leave Behind. And so that's what I'd like to explore with you a little bit this morning. What is it that we can't leave behind? And why would that be true? Theological education has complex and complicated goals. It's not a single goal. And not all modes of education might be able to accomplish those goals in the same way. The Association of Theological Schools, which I've mentioned several times, ATS, the accrediting body for DTS, for instance, has defined the goals of an MDiv program, a Master of Divinity program. And this is the way they define it. The MDiv education has a complex goal: the personal, vocational, spiritual, and academic formation of the student. So the MDiv is more than an academic degree. It's more than a professional degree. It's more than information. It's about formation. And the question is the online learning experience able to adequately address and accomplish those goals? And not only are these four separate areas, the personal, vocational, spiritual, but there is also the question of the integration of those things. Because theological education attempts to equip the student with the capacity to connect the dots between life and faith and learning. That's a complex process. Another question that we have regarding the nature of theological education is the pedagogy, the teaching. Because we believe that the seminary professor embodies the very goals of theological education. It's sometimes said that the faculty of the seminary is the curriculum. The seminary faculty member is someone who does more than simply communicates information. I'm intrigued by this print. This was a print that was made 100 years ago in France in the time of Jules Verne. And at that time, there was considerable interest in the implications of technology and how that might change culture 100 years hence. And so you can see there that this is in the year 2000. So where have we come? Is the teacher someone who simply, as this picture suggests, someone who selects the data and then in some way, perhaps technologically mediated, transfers that information into the empty receptacles of the students' brains? Or is the seminary teacher something more than that? Is he, she a model of what it means to be a reflective practitioner and one who lives their life and fulfills their vocation in the light of reasoned faith and in the presence of God? Is the seminary professor a mentor for the discipling of the student? One who can assist the student to practice connecting the dots between life and faith and learning and text and context and theory and practice. Reminded of the words of the Apostle Paul in 1 Thessalonians when he describes his ministry. I think you know the passage I'm referring to, when he describes this ministry as like a nursing mother who cares for her children. He says, with such affection for you, we were happy to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also what? Our very lives. Because you had become so dear to us. Is that not the expectation that we have also of the theological educator? Sometimes this is called incarnational pedagogy. And some seminary professors believe that this is a distinctive and essential understanding of their task. What is it that we can't leave behind? What is the essence of theological education and of the theological educator? And can that be practiced in the online environment? That's an essential question that needs to be asked before the glitter of technology catches our eye. And so there is this question of, is online education compatible with the task of theological education? And because of the uncertainties that are suggested by the questions I've raised, there has been some hesitance, some reticence or caution by seminaries in North America to adopt online education. You can see this, for instance, in the history of accreditation that ATS has of seminaries here in the U.S. Until the year 2000, MDiv programs had to be totally residential. There was no option for online education. Until 2011, accreditation standards allowed for up to 1/3 of courses to be online. And then a few years ago, in 2012, it was allowed for 2/3 of a course, a program to be, that is an MDiv program, to be online, but 1/3 had to remain residential. Now, it also allowed for some exceptions that a seminary could apply for so that their entire program could be fully online, and now some programs are fully online. But what's remarkable to me is the relative recency of this kind of development. Remember that in 2012, in comparing with the MBA programs, there are already 350 fully online MBA programs at that time. And this is a time where ATS says up to 2/3 can be fully online. So what's happening? What's the change of heart here that has led to this development? This has been changed by a mission-driven focus that seminaries realize that their mission is to reach those students who cannot come to a traditional program. Or is it financially driven in order to bring in new revenue-paying students, for instance? Or is it technology-driven? Thinking that technology, online education has improved, has changed, has developed in certain ways that now allow for that theological education task and goals to be more adequately fulfilled in the online environment. Perhaps all of these. But I think that it also is a reflection of further thinking about the educational task and about pedagogy. A new understanding of community and of a learning community that allows for online education to make a contribution to theological education. And so what has happened is a reassessment of online education, where the positive contributions of online education now are seen as a way to assist the seminary in fulfilling all of its goals. And that you can see that in several ways. You can see it when you think about access, where the traditional seminary, of course, access is limited to those who can come to the seminary and be resident. But now, through online education, there is opportunity for much greater access to students. And if that's a value for the secular university, how much more would it be of value for a seminary that is serving the church with the goal of equipping the saints for the work of ministry? Think of the value that is added, for instance, in students who are not only being equipped for ministry, but being equipped in ministry. Is that not also a value of theological education? And so it assists the student in connecting the dots between life and faith and learning, because you're not being extracted from one's normal everyday life and ministry. Or community formation. Do we perhaps overvalue community that takes place or is formed in a classroom of 100 students that are commuting? And is there a way that online education can actually enhance and build a community of learning as students interact online together and with the faculty? So perhaps we should see online education as a complement to, not replacing, but a complement to the traditional residential mode. One possible learning environment that has its own advantages and strengths. Let me finish with a few concluding thoughts on this online mode of education. First of all, and I can see our technology is not working well. First of all, cultural and contextual factors. Not every culture, it seems to me, is equally conducive to the online mode. Sometimes there are simply technological obstacles. Not everybody has convenient and easy and cheap access to online education. There are also cultures that highly value face-to-face, relational aspects of education. Perhaps protecting time for studies is not something that's highly valued in certain cultures, which makes all of these things not necessarily conducive for every culture. It's not about technology. It's about teaching. Technology is not a silver bullet. It doesn't fix what's wrong with education or theological education. The value of technology is directly proportional to the teacher who uses it. Poor teaching in the classroom will be poor teaching online, and perhaps even amplified. Even in the secular sphere, this is understood. This is a quote from a UNESCO report on the future of global university education that says, research indicates that even in the face of incredibly powerful and innovative technologies, teachers in both developed and developing countries remain central to the learning process. Let's beware of putting online education and face-to-face as somehow in a dichotomous relationship. And the reason I say that is because now there's increasingly the ability to blend technologically mediated education with face-to-face. Blending within one class, within one course, within programs. And the blended experience, the hybrid experience, then allows us to benefit from both what the residential model provides and what the online, the technologically mediated environment provides. So it's not an either-or necessarily. And finally, the question, the end of the seminary. Is online education the end of the traditional model? That is the debate, of course, in some colleges. This book was published either earlier this year or last year, The End of College, Creating the Future of Learning and the University of Everywhere. The Amazon blurb says this: the author explains how two trends, the skyrocketing cost of college and the revolution in information technology, are converging in ways that will radically alter the college experience, upend the traditional meritocracy, and emancipate hundreds of millions of people around the world. Well, online education is not the end of the seminary. As I've suggested, I think it's another aspect of the diversity of programs which we see seminaries embracing to meet particular needs of leadership development in the church. But this book and its title, The End of College, does bring us full circle. So let me conclude with this. Remember that on Tuesday we began with the question, does the seminary have a future? And what I suggested then, and I'll bring your attention to once again, is that the four questions that are often asked about the future of the seminary. Is the seminary effective? Is it sustainable? Is it responsive? Is it accessible? That these questions and our answers to those questions will indeed shape the seminary of the future so that we can fulfill our task of serving the church of the future. Thank you so much.